Welcome to Chicana City. And although this is the city of dreams and angels, we're also confronted with poverty, racism, inequality. And today's topic is reshaping the political narrative, because in this city, we also talk about the politics, even though a lot of our community has not spoken about politics or maybe avoids it at the dinner table or does not know a lot of our narratives when it comes to politics. And today we have Priscilla Luna, who is connecting with me through social media, and she's an activist, mother, Chicana. And, one of the biggest topics today is reshaping the narrative within politics, but not only that, is seeing the right representation really push out movement that we really need to have, right? So I'm Natalie Garcia. I'm your host. I am a Chicana, and I am a reporter and journalist, as you guys know. And, Priscilla, please tell me a little bit about you and your background, because we have a special guest, too, that I want you to introduce.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. Just know that I love the work that you're doing. It's really encouraging, inspiring to see other Latinas, Chicanas out there educating our community, whether it's through our culture, politics, or just even being a mom. Like, you inspire me. As we're mothers, we're all mothers here.
Yes, we are.
And I think, the power that comes with the responsibility of being mothers. But yeah, I think just also like the sisterhood, the supporting the support, that we really need in our community. So I really appreciate that. Know that your work inspires us as well. Mama of three. I actually homeschool my kiddos. So I'm born and raised in Los Angeles. Parents were born in Mexico, Nayarit, Chihuahua, and roots. But yeah, with social media, I was talking about, it's a little bit of a love-hate relationship for sure. But I think for me, it's like, I'm personally not like an immigration lawyer. I didn't study politics in college or anything like that. But a lot of it is like, we want a better world for our kids. We want a better world. We envision a better world. And I think part of that is understanding that politics does affect our life, our daily life, whether it's our reproductive rights, whether we can vote or not, even, looking at the like prison system, like all of that. A lot of it is, or schooling, education, healthcare, it's all related to politics. And so when we think of politics, it can be a little scary. And then also very disappointing when you're thinking of the political parties, and where you feel like it's just, not relatable, or you're just disappointed. And that's why we have Karina. So, who gives us hope and inspires us that, we don't have to participate in a two-party system, that there is more, and that we have people like Karina who are speaking for us, who are representing us, and who are giving us hope, because it can feel very like lonely, and feeling like, is this really what it's about? Is that all there is Democrat or, Republicans? And so I'm personally learning a lot about socialism. I'm like baby socialist, still learning a lot. But when I saw and I learned that you were running for the Party of Socialism and Liberation, and being Latina, a mother, like, I saw myself in you. And then I also saw a lot of the what you value and your life, and seeing some hope in that, seeing someone who can be a voice for women, for immigrants. I know you've done work with immigrants as well, and just relatable, but also giving us hope. So Karina is running for vice president for the Party of Socialism and Liberation. She's in New York, but she was also born in California, right? And then my brothers, I heard, or I think I read that you were in Fontana, like your family's in Fontana.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
brothers went to Kaiser High School.
Stop.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You're
So
connected.
yeah, so my brothers went to Kaiser. I went to West Covina High School. I moved out, went to college. My brothers ended up moving to Fontana. They went to Kaiser there. And so yeah, so just even seeing how you were like, in Fontana and talking about the workers there. And, I don't know if a lot of people understand Fontana and like all the truckers there and the industry there. It's like there was a reason why all of these companies also moved to that area, right? And so it's all connected. So how do we help our community see the connections and the importance of fighting for workers' rights and for our gente, because our gente deserve a lot more than what they're given. So, yes. So, Karina.
Welcome, Karina. We're excited to have you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. And to your baby socialist point, I have to say, like a lot of times our people are more socialist than quote unquote socialists, right? Like it's like, because it could be a label that some people can use, but it's not just about how some label. It's about like who you are as a person, and like what our communities are the most generous. We help each other. I mean, by far generous, right? Like really by far. I mean, I remember like a study from whatever, not even that long ago. It was a whole segment on ABC, and it was like the bottom 20% give double to charities than the richest people in the top 20%, double, right?
I love that.
And so like, of course, the rich, like they like to put their name on everything. They like to get a lot of promotion for whatever little pennies they give back to the people from what they've stolen from the people. And they like to make a big show about it. But it's actually our people who are not only the most generous, but who actually create all of the wealth in society. And I feel like, I always want to come back to the pandemic. Like we can't like we can't forget what happened there. Like when people ask about like socialism and what does it really mean? Like we say, working people make society run, right? Workers make society run, and everybody knows it. Workers should run society. That's socialism. Fred Hampton said what socialism was in the best simple way. Socialism is a people. And if you're afraid of socialism, then you're afraid of yourself. And so like the ruling class has taught us that socialism is a dirty word, that socialism is whatever scary thing they want to make it. But in fact, our movements all over Latin America, I mean, and not just Latin America, all over the world, because like the number one text besides the Bible is the Communist Manifesto. And so like, we're like taking back that history, and we have a rich history all over in our communities of people who are real socialists. And they might not call themselves socialists, but the way that they actually behave in reality, is socialist.
It's
So
without knowing, right?
yes,
It's like
exactly.
not making those connections. And I think a lot of that is
Food with food.
education part of it.
Yeah, definitely. So you
More
might be way
socialist
more
than we
socialist
think.
than some socialists.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background and why you are a part of this movement? What even made you want to be vice president candidate and kind of be a part of this, especially as a Chicana coming from, communities that are interconnected with all of us?
Yeah, for sure. So you like Priscilla said, I'm originally from Southern California, and I gotta rep both. It's both Long Beach and Fontana.
Okay. I love it.
It's Long Beach and Fontana because it's true. So like my mother passed away when I was young, when I was 5 years old, and after she passed away, we were living in Long Beach at the time, and then after she passed away, we moved to Fontana. And so like I grew up like my grandmother is my heart. She's like como uña y mugre. I was the mugre, I was the dirt under her fingernails. So
Yeah.
so I was at her house every weekend, every vacation when I got sick. I was always with my grandmother. So, but I had my shit. I mean, I worked in Fontana. Like I went to school in Fontana from basically from like second grade to high school. So it wouldn't really be, it'd be weird to say just Long Beach or just Fontana to me, because the fact is that we were always going back and forth. And my family is, close, and like our families help each other, support each other. Like
Yeah.
every one of my uncles and aunts, when they came to the United States, they all flowed through our house too. So my dad was one of the older ones. So yeah, so that's where I grew up. My dad, he came to the United States when he was 16 years old.
Mhm.
He's from Jalisco, like a very rural part of a little pueblito in Jalisco, ranchero, that's my dad's side of the family, and then my mom's side of the family comes from Mexico City, and so they're like city, and because I was with my grandmother all the time, I was very fortunate.
Chilangos. Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
So no, yeah.
Yeah.
So like I would go with her. She would go on her trips to visit her friends and do her things, and she would like sell clothes she would buy clothes cheaper in California actually, which is crazy, and then she would sell it cheaper to friends and family. Like, so she was always doing stuff, and I was with her, so I got to visit Mexico and I got to go around with her, and so I always kept like there's also like a level of pride, that happens from being able to go to your own country and see. I mean, there's a lot of inequality too. So that was apparent since I was a kid, like seeing kids in poverty. But then you find out in the United States, and you find out even yourself, right? Like there's a lot of childhood poverty in the United States. That's not specific to our countries in Latin America. That's specific to capitalism.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
um yeah, so that's kind of like my family background, and working class, right? Like my dad was undocumented for many years. And so a lot of my family was too, but we were born here. And so like with that comes something, you feel like you gotta do something.
Yeah.
And so um yeah, like when I was 18, I have to admit I was like trying to get out of Fontana, and because there's a lot of stigma about against Fontana. There's
Yes.
they used to call it like Fontucky and stuff like that. Like now I don't whatever. I feel pride when I go back to Fontana. Like
Yeah.
it's sort of the thing, like you take things for granted until you go away. And then you
Yeah.
Yep.
like, when I was in it was like, when I was in high school, I didn't join the med chat group because I was like, I don't need that. Like I got my family. I'm trying to do other things. But then when I went to New York when I was 18, I was like, where's med chat?
Yeah.
Where are you?
Yeah.
You know,
Looking for community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
community that I took for granted when I was there. And so, yeah, so I ended up being able to get this like full financial aid, like a win the lottery type of deal. And was able to go to college. And so I moved to New York to go to college. And so, when I got there, I was just like, I gotta do something. Like I gotta do
Yeah.
something to deserve this, because I knew how ridiculously hard and impossible it is to be able to access an education in this country, despite all of the, pushing and whatever, all the fake news about it, like the way that they talk about it, like it's your own failure. In reality, there's a million barriers that are stacked up against you. And when I got to Columbia, even they tried to make you feel like you're special. And I knew I was not special. It's just that they have put up so many barriers to let our people have access to this education. And that was the reality of it. It was a very unjust, unequal society. And it wasn't something about being special. It's actually the opposite. And the only reason that we were there to begin with is because our people fought for it.
Mhm.
And so, like, I went in there kind of with that attitude about it, and I went in, I wanted to be an investment banker. I was trying to make money. I was like, what can make money? I want to major in economics. I want to work on Wall Street. And then I started taking economics classes. And when I got there, I was like looking for community, right? So I joined all the student activist groups. I was on the women, the Democrats, the Amnesty International, like every single, I was trying to do something. I knew I was lucky. And yeah, I that's how I started getting involved in organizing, and then I started learning more about the United States and the
Mhm.
economy, and I started to realize it wasn't a mistake, it wasn't an accident. It was designed that way. It was designed, you know, for the tiny minority to exploit the vast majority. And it wasn't because they were smarter, wasn't because they were more whatever hardworking.
No.
It's because of slavery, it's because of genocide, it's because of a lot of dirt, a lot of dispossession, and a lot of violence.
Yeah. You started your like advocacy and when you were in high school too, right? I was reading some of that. Like you were it was for women's rights, reproductive rights.
Yeah.
Maybe tell us how that's like how did that start for you in high school?
It was different then because I was in my environment, I
Yeah.
was in Montana where I went, I went to all the schools there basically, right? And so it was different. So it was like around women's rights because I was just like, what? Somebody's gonna tell us whether we, what we can do with our bodies? No, I was already like, I was strong on those things. My tia Marta raised me right, and so like I was not having that kind of machismo. So um yeah, so like we started a women's group when I was 17 in Kaiser, and we had like a equal pay day, and it was like we did like I don't know, we gave like ribbons or something, but we were mostly just trying to talk about the issue and bring it out, and as women coming together, as young women coming together and like building with each other in a way that was like not limited, and that like we could talk about politics. We don't
Yeah.
need somebody to come
Yeah.
explain it to us. We can talk about this stuff.
And that's huge for Chicanas and for just even Latina women. I think part of this segment that I really wanted to invoke, especially like my alignment with Priscilla, I get a lot of my resources from her. I get kind of like I'm constantly on social media. I'm looking at trying to educate myself as well. Because and then she brought in socialism, and I was like, wait, I resonate with that. There is such a plus. It goes back to our own people, community, women's reproductive rights, all of
Yep.
that, but there's still like a lack of education. There's still like there's the fear, especially within our community. I think it's even beyond socialism. I think it's in general in politics. We tend to avoid the subject. We're disappointed. We're so deep in our oppression as well that we just don't want to even like, oh, we're done. Like it's not where this is the system and this is how it is. We can't change it from the inside or outside. For somebody who doesn't know exactly, I know you spoke a little bit what socialism is and might relate to it, but can you just like really break down what socialism is and what would a no socialism nation look like?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to jump on one thing that you said about isolation. I think that this is a big, big part of it. It's that our people are in this society in capitalism, and for good reason. The isolation exists, or the individualism of society exists, and it's very, very dominant, and we feel it, especially when we have children. We feel it. We're on our own. We feel like there's, no support, right? All of that we all know very closely. And I think that the difference is being a part of something, being a part of an organization, having a political project. Like that makes a difference. And some people find that in a church, and a lot of people don't. And for me, that's been all the difference. Like my exposure to organization, that's what's made all the difference. Because otherwise, you would be demoralized immediately, because the Democrats do nothing but betray the working class. They do that for the last 50 years. They do it over and over and over again, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And so the cynicism and the apathy that exists is justified. It's not actually even, it's like, it's just being smart. Like it's millions of people don't vote because they know that that's not the vehicle to make change in this country. It's not the thing, no matter how, they're not allowed to vote on anything that matters. They're not allowed to vote on whether their rent is going to go up. They can't vote on a living wage. They can't take a vote on whether or not they're gonna have health care, or whether insurance companies are gonna make themselves rich off of people who are sick. They can't vote for any of the basic things, the price of food. They can't make basic decisions about their neighborhood. So nothing really important are people allowed to vote about, right? And so like that kind of disconnect from our people to the political system is a very valid one. It's a justified one. Like the joke that is this like every 4 years and one person, and that the rich trade off go back and forth between their two corporate parties that really only benefit the rich. Like, our people have that knowledge, they just know it. And so, but I think the difference is like being part of a movement. And so for me, when I was in college, I kind of came up in that moment, 2006, when you could see that people power. That people power became something very real. You know, they tried to pass that horrible Sensenbrenner bill, which is going to make it a felony
Yeah.
for any undocumented person, anybody who helped an undocumented person. You could be a doctor, you could be a neighbor, you could be a family member. If you helped an undocumented person, you were going to get charged with a felony. That bill passed the House in like January or something of 2006. And there was a huge, reaction to that. Like, all of a sudden, the people who everybody said are too afraid and too exploited to ever stand up, they stood up. I mean, remember those times? Like, they stood up, and they stood up everywhere. They stood up in big cities, hundreds of thousands of people. They stood up in little cities, in places where we didn't even know there was Mexicans, everywhere. And so I was like, yeah, I'm part of this. I'm trying to help in this. And then, of course, the movements go up and down, and the Democrats try to redirect things back into the electoral process, back into, no, you guys get back.
Yeah.
We'll take it from here. We're the ones who understand this stuff. You guys don't understand. We're the ones who do this. And so, like, that's the political organization that's missing. That's what we're trying to build, because we have no shortage of movements in this country. There's so much struggle in this country for everything, for housing, against police brutality, for immigrant rights, like every kind of struggle. There's tons of it. But there's a lacking of our own political organizations that can unite all of these different struggles under one program. And that's really the purpose of this campaign. It's to do that, to provide this vehicle that, like, we actually need our own instruments. We need a party for the working class, of the working class. And that's what socialism is too. Socialism is having political and economic power for the working class. That the workers, make society run, they should run society. Like, this is what we're talking about, and I'm gonna go back to the pandemic, because it shows a lot of things that they say are impossible that are actually very possible and immediately happened during the pandemic without any real, like, fight, honestly. Like, all the things that they said was impossible. A moratorium on evictions, that happened. Free transportation, that happened. Not everywhere and equally, but that happened. Free internet, that happened. Like, people getting childcare payments, that happened. That was possible. People getting income, like, a lot of things that they say were never possible, could never happen, happened. We've been fighting for, like, a moratorium on evictions for years, and the Democrats were always saying that's impossible, you can't do it. When the pandemic hit, they did it immediately, because they understood the situation that they were in. And then to remind people of who actually makes society run. Like, when that pandemic hit, the super rich, they left the city in New York. They all left to the city. They went into their second or third homes in the Hamptons or whatever. And it was the nurses who wrapped themselves in garbage bags, because the government could send drones to Afghanistan. They can assassinate individuals all over the Middle East, but they can't send nurses PPE. So the nurses had to wrap themselves in garbage bags and show up to work and save people's lives. The sanitation workers, the truck drivers, like, you get a sense in those moments. The farm workers, you get a sense in those moments who actually matters in society. Like, we're always
Who
told
really runs it? Who really makes it happen?
it's the CEOs, the celebrities, the this and that. When it matters, we don't even, are they? And this is what they do. This is their good cop, bad cop circus that they play back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so, like, this campaign is to remind people of that. Remind people of that decade after decade betrayal. We've been organizing for immigrant rights. I mean, I don't want to say it since 2006. I'll say for me since 2006. But before that, right? And what have they done? Nothing.
Thing.
Breadcrumbs, nothing, nothing. They betrayed the people over and over and over again, right? Obama, sí se puede. And then he gets into office, no se pudo. He's
Yeah.
the one who became the deporter in chief. And who was with them? Same Genocide Joe was right there with them. And
Yeah.
they keep doing this good cop, bad cop, where the Democrats actually build the deportation machine. They are the ones who fund it. And then when a Republican gets in office, he just press play. And that's what Trump did.
Yeah.
That's the legacy of the Democratic Party. And so, you know, to the fear of Trump, there's also an understanding, I think, by a lot of people that it's the same shit.
Yeah.
And so we're saying it is the same shit, and we need to build something else. Let's build something else. Stop wasting. And this is for some people already are not wasting their time on it, right? A lot of people are not. And then there's some people who are like genuinely trying to like you said, do a lesser of two evils thing. But also, what's worse than genocide
Exactly.
at this point? And that is significant. That is a significant shift that's happening right now that we also have to keep in mind, is that there are a lot of people who are seeing past this, and young people who are like, nope, nope, nope. I've heard this lesser of two evils. I heard it in 2008. I heard it in 2016. I heard it in 2020. And now you're coming at me again, 2024, with the same thing. Like my dad says it, you know, mi hija nací en la noche, pero no anoche. You know, like
Yeah.
they're trying to block the sun with one finger.
Yeah.
That's where we are right now. But if there's no alternative, and if we're not being honest about what we actually need, because we could say all the things that we're against all
Yeah.
the time, but actually we need to build an organization, a project that's for us, and say what it is. It's not the Democratic Party, it's socialism. Like
Yeah.
we say, our headline, our slogan is end capitalism before it ends us. It's not vote for me and I'll set you free. That's what's been said over and over again. That's the individualism of putting one person into the system and thinking that, and saying that that person is going to change the system. No, one person's not going to change it. We need to change the system. We need to destroy the system before it destroys us. And we really don't have a lot of time, because we know that they are, even though they can, even though there's the resources, the technology, the people, the talent to solve these problems of inequality, of poverty, they choose to use our resources on endless wars. And they don't care about the people. And they spend $1 trillion every year on military, to drop bombs on other countries, to drag us into these endless war with people we really got no beef with. But then when it comes to our kids, they need $1 billion for WIC to feed little children and babies and women in this country. And they don't care about that.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party is focused on trying to get another $100 billion to Ukraine, to provide more weapons to Israel. We've already seen all the horrible things that they've done, to give them more. And then Taiwan too, because they're also trying to drag us into a war with China. So
Yeah.
like it's existential at this point. Like it's not, you can't stand on the sidelines, because they're either going to drag us into a nuclear war with the threat of artificial intelligence. Like before, it used to be that they used to say, oh, you know, like outsourcing. It's like that people are losing their jobs to other people who could be exploited. That was the case before, but that's not the case anymore. Now we're going to lose our jobs to, for real, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
You know? And so like, it doesn't have to be that way, but it's not going to be different if we continue to let them do whatever they want.
Yeah. And the cycle will continue. And I think that's part of it, is like, unless we make a radical decision, like there's nothing's going to change if we don't scare them too, right? So even like right now, we're seeing a lot of the propaganda of like Biden kind of like pushing back. Why? Because people are speaking up, because people are saying, we're not going to vote for you. So if you just kind of stay in the like, we're just dedicated and loyal to the Democratic Party, then nothing will ever change.
Yeah.
So the only thing, it's like, the only thing that will change is if you say no, if you make those radical decisions and say, we're going to go with a third party, and we're going to, you know, so it's like with any politician, you know, they say, you know, you have to like scare them a little bit. You have to, you know, show them that this is not okay. And so I think part of that is how, you know, trying to get people to understand that voting third party is breaking that cycle.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like what we're just gonna let them do what they want. And so that is part of, taking a stand and saying, yeah, like enough is enough. Like I que separa, like that's it,
And
but it's
we have to take power. Like we actually have,
take
and
your
we're not
power
saying
back.
that we're there at this point, but we have to start going in that direction where we actually, why should Jeff Bezos, one person, why should he by himself in be able to privatize for himself the wealth that is created by hundreds of thousands of workers, right? Like with Amazon, like the amount out from the products to the shipping to the exchange, like all of that, everything that's involved in the process, but one person gets to keep all of that wealth, right? Like, and look at what he does with it. In 2021, when millions of people are suffering, people are dying, they're in one of the worst health crises ever. What does this individual decide to do? He makes his own space station, his own personal, private spaceship.
Yeah.
So he can go with his friends to the moon, wherever, and go. That shouldn't be allowed. That
Yeah.
shouldn't be allowed. It shouldn't be up to him. That's the change that we're talking about. Like we're not saying just, oh, tax the rich. No, we want them out of power entirely.
Yeah.
We actually have to say, no, this is not, ya estuvo bueno. This is not allowed. You cannot keep the profits to yourself for the work that millions of people contributed to.
And not pay them. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And that brings me to taking part of your power back is also unpacking the fears, right? And part of the big fears, especially in Latina communities, is communism and associating communism with socialism and taking out capitalism out of it. But you're describing what Jeff Bezos is doing. And it's sounding very dictatory and very, so it's crazy that's actually happening. But when we are trying to move towards a socialism of working class, they automatically assume it with communism, which is a narrative that's been
Also demonized.
and it's a big propaganda, I mean, throughout our different countries, right? But especially here, we have been in that narrative of like, oh no, we don't want to push that because they'll get us closer, especially within Latinas who come from these countries that have been oppressed and dictator, not knowing that the ties are within the roots are here. Right. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to. I mean, it's the world upside down, right? Because this is called a democracy, but we all know it's a dictatorship of the rich because we don't have the power to make basic decisions about our lives, right? Half the population, they can't even make a decision about whether or not they and when to have a child. Like they have the right to be hungry. They don't have the right to get food. Like they don't have any of the rights that's been said. How many in the last 20 years? How many times whenever they want to invade another country and exploit their resources and exploit their people, they say they're fighting for democracy. That's what they said with Iraq, right? And 1 million Iraqis later who have been killed because of the profits of a few corporations, of Halliburton, of ExxonMobil. 1 million people killed. That's democracy? No, of course it's not. So it's a lie. It's an absolute lie that they've repeated over and over again, right? And like we have to combat that. And so, there's a reason that we're told that socialism is bad and it's a terrible thing because it's bad for them. It means that they can't continue to own everything and exploit everything and make decisions about our future that are narrow, short-sighted, and only for the benefit of a few. Socialism does mean that. That's why they hate it. They could be for anything else. Like you could be in any other type of group, but you can't be in the socialist group. That's the one that is never celebrated. And we don't want it to be because it actually is a threat. And we should understand it to be that. It's a threat to them. It's a threat to the people who have been benefiting, from the mass exploitation of our people. It is a threat to them. It means they can no longer make super profits by putting children to work.
you said a lot there that really just resonates with our community, especially like the first gen, second gen, even Chicano, but even within our immigration, like immigrant community that comes in and, they feel like they have no power, no, engagement. Where does the socialism and your movement really stand with the immigrant worker and the migrant, just like the injustice that are happening within our community? We see it, we feel it. Even as Chicanas, we're a part of, like, we connect with that because that's our community, that's our family, that's our tios, that could even be us because we even are being threatened
Yeah.
with being deported, even if we're born here. So
Our parents were not born here.
yeah. And so where does your movement stand? Where do you stand, party, with immigration reform?
I love that question because that was really the reason that I joined the party, honestly. Because the party was like, before when I was an activist and I was being very practical, I wanted to do something as a student to do something for my people at that school. And so I was part of this group called United Students Against Sweatshops. And so, like, what you could do is a perfect practical solution. It was like the students at this university can be in solidarity with the workers in the Dominican Republic, in Mexico, and Guatemala, and all these different places where US corporations are exploiting the people. And you can have these like student worker solidarity campaigns, and you could use your power as a student to put pressure on the university could put pressure on Nike, and you can help to lift the living conditions of other people, right? And that's a good thing because these like they're doing horrible stuff, right? And so that's within capitalism. I was doing that and I felt good about that. And then there was a comrade who asked, okay, well, what happens if you guys win? Like if you really 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 win and you get Nike to be the best capitalist around, right? And they give, better wages and they give all this stuff. What happens under capitalism? Under this system? And I was studying economic and I was just like, oh, well, I guess then Reebok, who might have worse conditions for workers, they would come in and take all that market share because the investors under capitalism are investing the rich are putting their money that they've taken on in all kinds of greedy ways. They're putting their money to get a return. And the rate of the return matters. Not just getting a return, the rate of return, right? So that means that if they're not getting the highest rate of return from Nike, they're going to go to another place where it's going to give them a better rate of return. And that rate of return keeps going higher and higher and higher the more that you squeeze the people, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, under capitalism, if you get Nike to be a good capitalist, they'll just be replaced by Reebok. And Reebok will be an even bigger capitalist now because now they've taken the market share of Nike and they're even stronger and they're even bigger. And it goes on like that. And that's the capitalist side of it that spoke to me. In terms of the immigrant rights struggle, I was still coming in from the perspective of like, I'm not supposed to be here really. Like, I got here because of this financial aid. If I didn't, my family's poor, if I working class, like if I didn't get this money, I wouldn't even be allowed to be here. So I should just be grateful and I'm here, thank you. Right. And so, I'm in this political moment where, immigration it's been a topic forever, right?
Yeah.
But I'm in this political moment where I'm hearing about illegal immigration and all this different stuff. And I'm just like, no, but the immigrants aren't bad. Like they're, like they're coming here because of this, that. I'm trying to convince liberals of the humanity of our people. And, it's not their fault. Like, and the difference was the analysis of a socialist party. I didn't have to explain that to them because they understood exactly why immigration was happening. They knew that immigration is a consequence of US imperialism. It's a consequence of capitalism. If US corporations can go wherever they want to exploit the people, to start wars with other countries and destroy their economies, those people are going to want to leave. They're going to migrate. So they're going to go follow the trail of what's been stolen from them. So far from us having to apologize for how we got here, they understood immigration to be a consequence of US imperialism, of capitalism.
Mm.
And so the solutions are so vastly different for the socialist than they are for the liberal. The liberal says, well, some of you yes, some of you no. And um, like they fall in line with the conservatives, right? And they're kind of okay. They don't really want us to have our rights. They just don't really want to be bothered with the same thing with the genocide, right? Like
Yeah.
they're so afraid of Trump. Even though this is happening, they care more about being afraid of something in the future than something that's happening right now.
Right.
The
Yes.
socialists, my party, did not have the position. My party, from the very beginning, said amnesty, full rights for all immigrants. Full rights for all immigrants. Not some immigrants, not the children, not the ones who came from Cuba, but not the ones who came from Mexico, not this, that, or the other. All of them. Because as long as there's a group of people in this country that can be super exploited, the capitalists will exploit them. And that's our people. Like the working class is our class. And it's our class in the United States, and it's our class in Mexico, and it's our class all around the world. And that's a very different answer because it helps you. It's not just a policy, it's a worldview, it's an understanding of history and political economy.
And
And
look at the
actually,
roots.
revolutions,
Yeah.
it goes to the roots.
Yeah.
So
Why are they coming? Right. And then it's
Yeah.
also focusing
not
on
be
they don't
criminalized.
want to be here. They want to be home.
Actually, it's their fault. It's the US government's fault.
Yeah.
Right? Like they are responsible. So US corporations, they want to flood Mexico's economy with NAFTA. They want to displace farm workers and people who had their own farms, campesinos, right? Because they want to make money in Mexico. So they can go to Mexico, these US corporations go to Mexico, have all kinds of effects on the Mexican economy, flooding their economies with US subsidized corn, for example.
Yeah.
Then those Mexican farmers can no longer lose their land. They are importing corn from the United States that's been subsidized by the US government, which is by us. And what are those campesinos going to do? They come up north, only to what? Be super exploited by these same corporations, to be treated and dehumanized and called illegals. You know why we're here. They know. I'm sorry. They know why we're here. And so like that's the thing that the Democratic Party won't tell the truth about that. They like to play dumb. And my party, the PSL, doesn't play dumb.
Yeah. And we already saw the gentrification of Mexico City, of big cities in Mexico and smaller towns and everything. So that narrative being switched where they're not being called illegal, they're not being called, they're invading our, like they are really, and the prices, we've seen prices of food go up, rent go up, and, even just the economics in Mexico have been changing within the last couple years, actually,
Yeah.
even more since the pandemic. A lot of Americans are proud to just go run over there, even have a second home out there, have no consequences and then not have, the ability to be like, oh, we're not legal. We're here. We're helping your economy. But vice versa, when Mexicans come here, it's a whole different narrative. So I love that you brought that in.
And then immigration is a symptom of capitalism. And so then, if we were then to change that narrative and instead of asking about like, well, what about immigration? Then maybe the question is capitalism isn't working. And so that's why a lot of Americans are now moving to Mexico and to other, places because capitalism isn't working. So then the question is, let's focus on capitalism and switching over to socialism and educating our people through then we won't have all these other issues.
Yeah.
And so educating people about that.
No, and I think when you started talking about Mexico, it's also at the very same time, how is the US relating to Mexico right now too? You have the Republicans who are doing their little threats against Mexico. That they're gonna invade, that they're gonna do this, that, and the other. We all know it's BS because Mexico is not a little country. Like they like to talk tough, but it's not a little country. So, and if you couldn't win in Afghanistan and you couldn't win in Vietnam, which are smaller countries, you are definitely not going to win in Mexico. But it's not really about winning. It's about bullying, right? And so like for me, when I was approached with socialists, when I met socialists, my party, the PSL, I actually was not like super hostile to it at all. Because like for some families, like, you know, Chicano families, like they're afraid of it. But like and my family was not socialist at all. But the way that I understood Cuba was not like a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like when I saw pictures of Che, I was not mad at Che. I was not mad at Fidel, because to me, the way I understood those is that they fought for their own country. They took back their own country. Their revolution said to these US corporations and to these rich people who were treating their country as a casino, as the playground for the rich, where they would come and set up shop and they would exploit the people and they would exploit the resources. And they said, yeah, ya estuvo bueno. And they had a revolution. And this tiny country, this small little country, with against this giant bully with the biggest military and the biggest whatever, and the people won. Because they were not, they actually supported the revolution. And it's been 60 years of threats, of terrorist attacks against the Cuban people from the part of the CIA, the State Department. And no matter how much they tried to overthrow the Cuban Revolution, they haven't been able to. And so that to me was also like, that hits too. That's a reality. That's not just like some ideas. And so like, even when I was going around to the party, it's not that I necessarily even wanted a revolution or that I thought that a revolution in this country was possible. For me, when I started, I just thought like, well, this is right. Like
Yeah.
capitalism can only give us what it's giving us. And actually, this is the right thing to do. And I don't know if it's possible or not, but it's the right thing. And I'm going to try to build the right thing. Like this is a working class party. Like I actually think if the change is possible, it's going to be possible by working people being involved in it. Not just students, not just rich people with their charities, but like working people. And then when I was able to go to Cuba, it sort of made some of these things more real to me too, because then I start to see the real people, that it's not just the photographs and, you know, the Che pictures, but it's like who sustains and defends the revolution, and the way that the Cubans are organized with their committees of defense for the revolution, their women's organizations, their student organizations, their May Day marches, like the way that the Cuban society is organized. And that's not to say that things are perfect and everything is perfect in Cuba. And no, because the US has been suffocating Cuba. Even in the pandemic, they put them on the list of state sponsors of terrorism, which is the most ridiculous thing, because the US, who has been invading Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, invading all sorts of countries, Cuba has not invaded any other countries. Cuba sends doctors to Haiti, to all over Latin America. They send, you know, technicians. They fought against apartheid in South Africa. Like that's what Cuba does. They send doctors and professionals to help other countries in Latin America, even though they themselves are being squeezed by the US that says, if you trade with Cuba, you can't trade with us. And still, they still have been able to defend their revolution. So like those kind of realities, I think for me too, like they make a difference in the way that my approach to it and my understanding of actually what is possible. Because like we live in the richest country in the world. There's no scarcity. Cuba had to overcome underdevelopment and colonialism, and they have a blockade. They have the world's biggest military power breathing down their neck, preventing them from getting the supplies that they need, even when they can get them. We live in the country where a lot of our food is just being wasted. Right? They'd rather throw it in the garbage than give it to our people.
Yeah.
And I remember that my aunt used to work at McDonald's. They used to make her put a lock on the garbage cans to prevent people from going and getting a burger from the garbage can. Like that's capitalism, you know?
Yeah, and I love that you said like what is possible, because we saw in 2000 and back when Bush was in administration, we got the order of ICE, right? ICE was organized and it's been built as an organization to, you know,
protect the US.
So this was, I mean, how many millions of billions of dollars have gone into these organizations, and to protect the US. So the immigration reform is possible. Organizing immigration is possible. Having more understanding is possible, but not in the way that they're trying to do it. And the way that they were doing is more of oppressive. So they do have the means to do it. It's just trying to organize that better. What is your thoughts on ICE in general? How it's been so oppressive to our own community, but how would, dismantling it and then having a bigger, like something more impactful for our community that helps our community and really protects everyone, not just certain individuals and oppress other individuals.
Yeah. I mean, that's where like the analysis of foreign policy and US imperialism as a system, that's where that's the most important. That's really the difference between the socialists and the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Because we're saying that in order to understand immigration, you had to go to the root. What are the root causes of immigration?
Mhm.
And if you go to the root causes of immigration, then it has to do with a lot of meddling and a lot of US interventions, and it has to do with US corporations and the history of dirty wars in Latin America and the fact that the US thinks they own the world, and they just the US government, right? Not the people, because the people actually don't have any interest or desire to invade Iraq or invade Afghanistan, or even overthrowing other countries, right? In Latin America, like they did with Chile, like all of the dirty wars in El Salvador, like training death squads. That's the history of the US government in Latin America. And so for that, I would point people to this good book, Open Veins of Latin America. Like this is about, like, you know, there's no such thing as poor countries in Latin America. There's only exploited countries,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? And so and they're being exploited by the rich in the United States. And that's not actually even benefiting poor working class white people in this country. It's not benefiting anybody but those rich people. And
Mhm.
so you got to look at the root of it. And if we were actually, and when you take another step back too, and you think about the climate problems that we're facing too, that's another thing, right?
That
And
we
so the
have
global
immigration.
north,
Mhm.
yeah, the global north, responsible for what's happening with the environment, and the global south, the ones that are about to pay for it. That has to change. Like in any kind of logical system would see that if we have all of our markets international, our whole economy international, then our solutions to climate change would be international. That we would actually treat other countries with dignity, that we would take responsibility for the crimes that they've committed that are impacting the global south. And so like the spirit of a socialist foreign policy would be a spirit of cooperation. It would be a spirit of shared humanity. It would be about taking that wealth that has been stolen from the world and using it to improve everybody's standard of living. That every single person in the whole world actually could have healthcare, education, basic sanitation, like all these things are possible. We actually live in a moment where the technology and the resources exist for that, but we're being held back by a group of people who,
Yeah.
what do you say about them, right? In a time of a pandemic, instead of they use public information to develop the vaccine, but then as soon as they develop the vaccine, intellectual property, they don't want to share it.
Yeah.
In a
Um,
global health crisis, when the whole world needs to get rid of COVID. And no, the private profits of pharmaceutical companies are first before saving people. So just like they don't care about people in Iraq, Afghanistan, they don't care about people in LA, and they don't care about people in the United States, right? They let people die. Their COVID policy was worthless. In China, however, they were actually making sure that people had food, that people had healthcare. They built hospitals during the pandemic. Like they're actually trying to move forward. And this country, the ruling class is not. They're not putting any of our resources where they could be. So like our solutions are totally practical. Like we actually should be using the resources that they're throwing at Halliburton for more war and all that military spending. We would cut that 90%, and we would use that to build infrastructure in this country and provide everybody with their basic needs. That's socialism.
I was thinking, like, I think a good understanding of with all these different like issues and topics, is under socialism, you wouldn't have mass what is it, like people coming to the States, because their countries aren't, we're not exploiting their countries,
Right.
because we're sharing resources, because we're being fair. And so under socialism, all of those issues that we have now, which the Democratic or Republican Party are not providing solutions, they're making it worse. So a vote for the Democratic Party is more war, more exploitation, more invasion, which is causing more immigration. They're not taking care of the planet, right? So under socialism, joining the movement, being part of the movement, you have to think long term. But also under socialism, you wouldn't have exploitation. We wouldn't be at war. There is no capitalism, and you're not, invading other countries, which then is causing. So if we were a socialist society culture, there wouldn't be this issue of immigration, like people having to cross the border that way. There would be a fair pathway if you wanted to come, but most of the people that are coming, they didn't want to come in the first place, and they wouldn't come if we left their countries alone. So that would be the solution, is that we leave, we help them, right? Instead of exploiting them and invading them and causing all this corruption. So then, it would be a better world.
It's an absurd thing what their logic is, because if you look at Palestine, right? So it's like you are destroying their country completely, and then those people are going to leave. So now you're going to criminalize them wherever it is that they go. Well, the Palestinians are not going to leave. They've been fighting for a long time. It's not going to be so simple. But I'm saying the condition, the example, it's a logical example. Criminalize the people who are leaving that situation, right? That's what capitalism has to offer. But obviously it's nonsensical. And then if you look at the migrant crisis that they call migrant crisis, it would be not that complicated to stop. A lot of people that are coming from Cuba and Venezuela, that could stop if the US stops sanctioning and blockading Cuba and Venezuela. The United States government intentionally creates policies meant to suffocate those countries, to punish them for taking back their countries. That's what it is. That they're saying, this is our country. We're going to use our resources to develop our own industries. And ExxonMobil is not going to own this forever. Like, these are our resources. We're going to use them however we want for our people. And those Chavez, Maduro, those people are vilified, just like Fidel was vilified in this country. But Fidel is a hero around the world. Fidel is a hero around the world because he stood up and he had a revolution with many other people for his own country to take back their own resources. And so like that's like foreign policy, like they tried to say, oh, they're fleeing because socialism is so bad. Okay, then why don't you just leave them alone? Stop invading, stop sending your CIA, stop putting all of these financial constraints, because everybody knows the US controls the financial system, right? The United Nations is we see it all the time, the undue power that the US has.
We are the bullies of the world.
In the world. Yeah. And so they have all these policies meant to suffocate the people who are trying to take back their resources. And then inevitably some people are not going to take it, and they're going to leave. And so you want them to stop coming, stop fucking with their country, leave them alone. Like the Cubans have lost $150 billion from the blockade. $150 billion because of all of the extra, how expensive they make it for them to be able to access things on the global market. That's an artificial thing. That's not because of socialism. That's because of US domination over the world financial system. And so like if you really wanted to stop that, we'll just stop bullying these other countries and people won't have to leave.
And so we come across unpacking yet another fear narrative, which is if we stop funding those wars, stop funding those armies, the military, then we leave ourselves susceptible to being attacked ourselves. Because again, we played such a big part in exploiting and destabilizing other people's country. So it's now a way of, protecting ourselves. And, we don't want to say that we did that, but now we're like, oh, it's protecting, not realizing that the root of that is part of, we destabilize everything. What would you say to people who are in fear of like, well, we'll be attacked. Oh, we're going to be, there people from Mexico are coming through the borders. They're going to come in here with guns and kill our country. And, people in China are coming here. Like, there's such a fear of being targeted and attacked. And when we think of a different party, a socialist party, for instance, we think that we're going to become more of a target with that. Is that true? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I think like I wouldn't say we, with the US government or the US military industrial complex. That's not ours. That's theirs. That's the capitalist ruling class of the United States. And I've actually been surprised when I've traveled and met with people from around the world, about how, because people have a consciousness about also, even though we might not be exposed to it even, right? But about the class struggle in this country too. And that like the people who are really benefiting from the system, really benefiting from these wars are just a tiny group. And so like with Cuba, they would have all the reason to hate Americans, but go to Cuba and see how they treat you. Like the way that the Cuban government talks about the American people versus the American government is very different because we actually have the same analysis. We understand that the people have more in common with each other than we do with this empire, with the US empire. And I think that it wouldn't be something just in words alone, but it would actually have to be in deeds. Like if let's just say, and we know that this is not that simple, but let's just say we were empowered tomorrow, right? We know it actually requires building real political organizations. But let's just say we were empowered tomorrow with Palestine, right? Obviously, immediately you cut the financing with the state of Israel, right? The Palestinian people should get reparations. What a difference it would be if the United States were to actually rebuild what has been destroyed by the Israeli government. What a difference it would make for the consciousness of the people that are there and for the relationships that the United States has with the world. Cuba, this is a lesson from the Cuban Revolution. This is what the Cubans do. And the Cubans are not rich. They don't live in the richest country in the world with the biggest military in the world. But like they give what they have. And so like there's been so many brigades where Cuban, like I was talking about the doctors, but not even just doctors, with teachers, right? That they believe in international solidarity and they know that it's concrete, you know, to stand with the people of the world in real ways. And so when Cuban doctors go into remote places in Bolivia, in Ecuador, in Venezuela, and they don't go and pillage their resources. They go and they train other doctors, they train other educators, they give people services, and then they leave. And that's a different relationship. That's a concrete relationship. The US does not have that relationship with any other country in the world. And what a difference it would make for us to do it. And I know that people would sign up for it because people have.
Yeah.
There's a history in this country, even with the fascists in Spain. There was a brigade of Americans, socialists, that went to Spain to fight fascism. So there's international solidarity in this country too. There's a history of it, but it's something that's very much hidden from us. It's something that, in order to make us believe that we're in such a scary, awful situation, they're going to be our protectors, they have to erase our history, and they have to put, like you said, put that fear in us about the other people. But in fact, we don't have beef with those other countries, and we would take steps to make amends with those other countries. We actually have a lot more in common with them, and I believe that the people of the United States, and they already do, because there's plenty of people who do Doctors Without Borders, all these different programs, right? But those things are like, it's actually good-hearted people, but then, it's sort of like a PR for capitalism for the United States. But it's the people themselves that do it. The people are the ones who do all kinds of things like this, you know? So, like, I mean, for me, I could say, like, my experience too, like, what made me believe socialism is really possible is when I was going to travel in South Texas, when I was in one of the poorest parts of the country and seeing the organization of the women. Those women, the way that they help each other, the way that they organize their communities, the house meetings that they do, with the little resources that exist for immigrant women, which are almost nothing and really bad, and especially in racist Texas. And they fight and they knock on each other's doors and they have their juntas and they actually help each other, you know, and they fight against deportations and they fight for stolen wages and they fight for all kinds of things. And you see how they run the ship too, you know, like the organizers is like with nothing more of an organizer than a mom, right? Like if you can organize a birthday party, you're an organizer. Like, but we're just sort of translating our skills in different things. We can do a lot more. So I feel for me that was actually impactful because I started seeing like, oh, this is our own people. Look at how they're organized. Look at how they help each other. Look at how they run shit. Those are concrete examples for me of not only why socialism is possible, but how our people are already, in a lot of ways, living in a socialist way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do agree with that, that we have already done the humanitarian work. We go out, we rally, we work,
Mhm.
we help each other, we uplift each other, even within businesses or just in general, like we're trying to spread a lot of our wealth within, we have a little bit here, you take a little bit. So,
Yeah.
and that's just the community, right? And, I definitely, thank you for being with us today, especially on just giving us more education. I do come from that background that, politics was just never spoken in our house, and if we did, it always end up in a fight or we disagreed. But I think it's important that education is important, and because a lot of the narratives have been based on fear, especially within our community. I mean, if you speak out, you leave, automatic, you might get deported, you might get arrested, you might, all of these things. So it is important to start opening up these dialogues and opening ourselves to, hey, there's more than two choices, right? That, I want to wrap this up, but I don't know if you want to add some things to that. But my question too for you is like, we talked about Gaza a little bit in Palestine, but there's intersectionality between Chicanos and indigenous people, because a lot of people are like, well, that's happening overseas, that's not
Yeah.
us. But just like the displacements of a lot of our own countries down in the south, it's happening overseas, and we're seeing that, again, we're funding it, we're a part of it, we know it. Where does the political party stand, the socialist party stand in that section of, kind of just like seeing the intersectionality and saying, yeah, we have to repair that. We have to give them reparations. Just like we deserve reparations, they deserve it too.
Absolutely. The Palestinian people are our people. Like we don't have anything in common with the US government. We don't have anything in common with the apartheid Israeli government. That we see the same way that they displace and dispose and they set up all their walls and they harass and all of the different types of violations that the Israeli government does against the Palestinian people, the US government has done against our people in this country too. And they very much work, I would say that the U.S. It's we know about the IDF's kind of training it too. Yes, for sure. They have a communication back and forth. They help each other. They of course the U.S. finances Israel. So Palestinian people, our people, we have nothing in common with the Israeli apartheid Jim Crow government. Just like we have nothing in common with our own racist also kind of apartheid government in the United States. You go to Tijuana, you see that wall, you start to see, the walls that the Israeli government has set up all over Palestine. And when we talk about, land theft,
Yeah.
help but think about the whole Southwest.
Yeah.
On a land theft that we're familiar with that is glossed over, but that is very real,
Yeah.
right? About the criminalization of indigenous people, how they've been pushed off of their land and then um, humiliated in ways that are unspeakable, really.
Yeah.
Um, We don't have to like, it's not like a big stretch. When you see it, you recognize it.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's resonating with so many people, so many people around the world, because capitalism is global and US imperialism is global. And so all around the world where you see these massive demonstrations of people coming out and supporting Palestine and saying free Palestine and the occupation and the siege of Gaza, stop US funding of this genocidal Israeli state, is because the people see and they feel it. They understand it. If you
Similarity.
have a brain and a heart, you will see what they are doing and you won't see yourself in it. You won't want to be a part of it. And on the flip side, when you see the Palestinians, the humanity, the incredible resistance for over 75 years, you see who you want to be. You see who you can, like it makes you want to sit up straight, and that's really powerful too. The way that the Palestinians have been able to resist
Yeah.
despite having the biggest military force against them. That is a remarkable um, feat that shows you, people who want to be free are going to be free.
And we are touching on the, if nobody's free, none of us are free, like it's liberation for all of us. It is like Palestine is part of that movement. So I want to thank you so much on educating me about socialism, and Priscilla too, for ongoing those posts. I know she's like, I have a love and hate relationship, but I, someone who works in social media and media, I get my information from sources like this, and it goes beyond social media. We also meet each other, and we see the protests. We'll have community events, and I think that community is a big part of this, and educating ourselves and aligning with community. Is there resources that you can tell us about where people can find community and learn to educate themselves a little bit more on what you're doing, on the socialist movement, on just in general community?
For sure. Okay, so I'll say, in terms of our campaign website, votesocialist2024.com, that's where you can find out about Claudia and our campaign. But we have the Party for Socialism and Liberation. We have many websites that we also have. Liberation School is a great place for you to find resources to be able to have these discussions and conversations around everything, right? Around imperialism in Latin America, immigration, women's liberation movement, Black liberation movement, indigenous rights, like everything that you are interested in. We have some resources for you, and probably even toolkits that you could use to have your own cafecitos, your own meetings. Like that's what we're trying to build.
Right.
So Liberation School is a good site. pslweb.org is our party's website. Um, Liberation News is where we have, daily articles analyzing what's happening in real time and putting forward a socialist solution. What is it that we could actually do? What is it that we need? What is it that we deserve? And why we don't have to take these little breadcrumbs from these mediocre people. And then I also have, like, if you're interested in getting a little bit more deeper into like what a socialist United States could look like, we have a book that we've created, Socialist Reconstruction, a
Mm-hmm.
future for the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an example, because we're not Cuba and we're not Vietnam and we're not these other countries. We're the United States. We have the resources of the United States. And so, like, what's possible in this country, right? If there was socialist revolution, what would actually be our program? What would we actually be able to have? And so it shows what is our different approach to all of these questions, from education to healthcare to climate change to, incarceration, police brutality, detention. Like, what is a socialist answer? What would be possible in the United States on all of these important questions? Infrastructure, transportation, energy, all of these things. So look at the book, read it. Like, we don't have to accept these breadcrumbs. We can actually fight for what we know we can have and what we deserve, but we do have to get organized to do it.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
then you guys have a chapter in almost every state. So I know for like we're in Los Angeles, so that would be PSL Los Angeles, and they have, they're protesting, they have several meetings, they have, so if you're in the LA area, it's PSL Los Angeles. But in whatever other state that you're in, look up PSL. And I mean, you guys are, I think, everywhere. So that would be a great, like, in joining the movement and learning more is you can go and find them on Instagram, or I'm sure through your website,
For sure.
and go and meet people, go and talk to people and join their movement there. And then follow you guys on Instagram, TikTok, and I know I love watching your videos, and you do inspire us. I'm like, okay, like I don't have to, be stuck with Biden, or I mean, a lot of it is we won't vote. But then now we have an option, let's join a movement. Let's get this started. And so when people say like you're gonna throw away your vote, I'm like, no, it's gonna go to Karina and Claudia. So I'm not throwing it away.
Yeah, and realizing after this conversation, it's like, oh, I do have a little bit of socialism. And 'cause I came in totally not understanding. Well, no, I had the concept, but I'm like, oh, wait, I do move in that way because I do a lot of humanitarian efforts.
Yeah.
I am more, I'm like, I have that narrative within me, like, okay, spread the wealth, build it, come with me. We're coming in. We might be more socialist than we
Than
really,
we really think.
yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of it too is the culture,
Listen to
right?
people.
The US, yeah, it's like the US individualistic mindset, the like, I'm gonna go and get a degree and go and, conquer the world and become a billionaire.
Yeah.
And, it's like, is that, it's also shifting. Like, is that really like, we don't need to do that. If we all had healthcare and we had all the things that we needed, we're not thinking about, I need to go make $1 billion and how, because we know at the end of the day, in order for you to do that, you're going to be exploiting people.
Yeah.
And we don't want to do that. That's not in our nature. And so then it conflicts, right? The conflict of the culture of the United States just doesn't fit with, it doesn't fit. Like
It's so-
I would be, we were talking about
the US too.
Yeah.
yeah.
And like that's not even like we have in Mexico we have our own values about quality of life.
Yeah.
That you don't take anything with you when you die. What you leave behind is who you were as a person, and whether you were worthwhile enough for your family to talk about you, whether you were a decent enough person. Dia de los Muertos, right? Like we know, and we talk about death all the time, that you don't take anything with you. So what is the purpose of your life? What is the meaning of your life? It's what you are able to do with others, who you are. It's not how much money you can accumulate.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's definitely a culture shift. And then we don't feel like with socialism, that feels more at home. That feels more of like this, it feels right. Right. And that's like, it just feels right. Like
Which
this is,
Which talks about a lot of our Latina entrepreneurs that go into these corporate settings and say, oh, I'm dealing with imposter syndrome because I don't fit in here. And then you start realizing we don't fit in because we don't have that mentality of trying to exploit our own people. And when we do, we're like put in that position, we're exploiting ourselves, it's really digging deep these narratives that we've been taught that are like, oh, I don't fit in, or this is not my narrative. But we've been kind of just really indoctrinated most of our lives. So,
you should be proud of that. You're right. Like you should actually be proud of that because you're a decent person.
Yeah. And we were talking about that, like former employers, and you're just like, okay, you're rich, but how did you get there? And I don't want to do that. How do we be part of that? And that's not,
Yeah, we see a lot of Latina entrepreneurs, Latina, just women who are rising to building different structures. So like I said, they might be a little bit more on the socialist side anyways. We're not really calling it that. So, but I love that you have these resources that we can start learning and unpacking these fears and really reshaping the political narratives within ourselves. So thank you, Karina. If you want to have any last statements for our audience, please do. Thank you again for being here. Priscilla too, appreciate you.
For sure. No, just thank you so much for what you're doing too. It makes a big difference to be able to, like you said, see yourself reflected in what's out there, you know, whether it's on TV and blogs and social media. Like, it makes a difference to be able to have these important conversations in our community, and to be able to dream bigger, and to demand bigger than what it is that they're offering.
I love that.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
Yay.
Well, thank you again, guys, and we'll tune into the following weeks. I appreciate this, and I'm gonna go check you out soon enough. So thank you, Karina, for representing.
Yeah, and then you're also in town next week, right? And
Yeah.
so we'll get to see you then.
Yeah.
Come through, check out PSLA, get the information. But we're going to be doing a launch event there on next Thursday. We're going to be meeting with some students in UCLA. They have a list of stuff that's going to happen, but you could better find it on their Instagram.
This will probably air after, but I will
Yeah.
definitely recap the event because I'll be there too, and I'm just excited
Nice.
to go beyond the screen and really build
Yay.
community in person. So thank you again, and I'll see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.